Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Civility, courtesy, compromise, and Zacks. Yes, that's what has been on my mind lately because of some of the things that I've encountered in my own life. To be more specific, what I've been struggling with is the lack of civility in so-called civil discourse that takes place in our country today. Now, of course, most of this is most evident in the political sphere, but it also extends to other areas of our lives. Particularly for me, a lawyer and a former jurist, really, whose life's work has been about trying to peaceably solve other people's problems. From my own clients to waiters in restaurants to TSA agents at the airport to people on the street, civility, it seems to me, has become a bygone feature of public interaction. Now, the word civility actually means courtesy, politeness, civilized conduct of a civilized world. And for a long time, it was the norm. There were gentlemen and there were ladies, and each acted accordingly. Today, however, there are broads and blokes and a word that rhymes with witches. If you don't believe me, just watch any reality television show, and their words and deeds are often tasteless, ill-mannered, vulgar even. In fact, it seems that making public spectacles in a desire to fulfill one's personal has supplanted simple courtesy. Simple upset has made way for all-out warfare. People fight. They prefer to fight rather than engage in insane discussions where they share their ideas with one another. And in all of this, we have lost something I fear that's vital, indeed crucial, to our civilization. We've lost mutual respect for one another. And in this, we are very much like the Zacks that Dr. Seuss wrote so famously about. In fact, I fear that we have, in large part, become the Zacks. Now, I love mostly all of Dr. Seuss's stories. As a child, I just simply loved the sing-song cadence of his writing, as well as his bizarre characters. And as I grew older, still reading Dr. Seuss, even when I was on the bench, I marveled at Seuss's ability to make a point, to teach a lesson without sounding moralistic or preachy. Dr. Seuss's messages about justice and equality and compassion and ecology, among many others, seem to me to be always pointing us toward a more hopeful tomorrow, pointing us in the right direction. And yet today, as I revisit these stories again and again, I continue to find many, many layers in them. So let's take a look at the story of the Zacks for just a few minutes, if you would.
One day, making tracks in the prairie of Prax, came a north-going Zacks, a north-going Zacks, and a south-going Zacks, a north-going Zacks, and a south-going Zacks. And it happened that both of them came to a place where they bumped. There they stood, foot to foot, face to face. "Look here now," the north-going Zacks said. "Hey, say, you are blocking my path. You are right in my way. I'm a north-going Zacks, and I always go north. Get out of my way now and let me go forth." "Who's in whose way?" snapped the south-going Zacks. "I always go south, making south-going tracks. So you're in my way, and I ask you to move and let me go south in my south-going groove." Then the north-going Zacks said with north-going pride, "I never have taken a step to one side, and I'll prove to you that I won't change my ways if I have to keep standing here 59 days. "And I'll prove to you," yelled the south-going Zacks, "that I can stand here in the prairie of Prax for 59 years. For I live by a rule that I learned as a boy back in South-going school. Never budge, that's my rule. Never budge in the least, not an inch to the west, not an inch to the east. I'll stay here not budging, I can and I will, if it makes you and me and the whole world stand still. Well, of course, the world didn't stand still. The world grew. In a couple of years, the new highway came through, and they built it right over those two stubborn Zacks and left them there, standing unbudged in their tracks.
Now, as you can see, the Zacks is a familiar story of stubbornness, arrogance, and incivility. There is, however, one very important difference between us and the Zacks. For the Zacks, the world did not stand still. As you can see, it just built up around them. The same cannot be said for us. Our intransigence has led to paralysis. Our pig-headedness has brought about stagnation. We have become the Zacks. We don't admit when we were wrong or try to help others we care about see when they were. We don't back down. God forbid that would be a sign of weakness. When it comes to a difference of opinion, it's as clear as day. I'm right and you're wrong. But this stubbornness has had dire consequences. One such consequence I've noticed is that people are slowly losing the ability to learn from one another. Rather than listen and hear and carefully weigh the ideas that might be counter to one's own personal beliefs, most people just sit seeking only to ensure that their point is the one being heard, and they usually do so loudly and often. Some people have become so polarized in their beliefs that they are unable to even entertain those with opposing views, much less engage in any kind of meaningful discussion with them. Now, there's a lot of pretension in this approach because it's based on the premise that you alone have access to the truth. Only you know what's best. In its wake, we have left not just the polarization problem, but we've actually devalued human beings because so many of us believe that their beliefs aren't just wrong, but are dangerous. Many of us act like this acts because we yearn for certainty, we yearn for control, and I know I can be like that sometimes. At a time when our world looks so bleak, we yearn to shape the future by our own design. At times when problems seem so large and so complex, when things seem beyond our control and our very understanding, we seek assurance that everything will work out in the end. And so with the determination and sheer conviction of our beliefs, we try to argue our world into existence and damn be anyone who doubts us or who gets in our way. Of course, none of this comports with our democratic traditions. One of the hallmarks of the American democratic experiment is that a plurality of opinions and approaches enhances, not diminishes, the vitality of this great nation of ours. In fact, this is the underlying premise of American democracy, and it didn't just begin in the modern era. When I was in law school here at Emory, I learned, for example, that the Constitution of the United States had many different interpretations. And it was the job of people like me, for the most part, our nation's lawyers and judges, among others, scholars, to expose those different interpretations so that a discussion could be had in the public sphere about what the document actually should mean today. Thus, I always thought that the study of the Constitution was less of a search for the answer and more of an exploration of the wonderful possibilities that exist. Now, in a talk he gave to his congregation recently, where he also used the Zacks as an illustration, Rabbi David Alexander said that it's no wonder then, as the story goes, that when the judge was asked to settle a dispute and had listened to one side, she declared, "Well, you're right." And then after listening to the other side of the argument, she declared, "Well, you're right." Whereupon the lawyers in the courtroom were exasperated and said to the judge, "Well, Judge, we can't both be right." And whereupon the judge said, "You're both right." Admittedly, this approach is not without its challenges. In fact, I've often been frustrated as a jurist and as a citizen of this country by the very open-endedness of the study of the Constitution and our laws and its multilingual tradition that we have. How, for example, can you ever really be sure about the justice of a document that says explicitly in one section, and I quote, "all men and not women are created equal, and black people are only 3/5 of a man," when you are an African American woman? When you're faced with such contradictions, you begin to yearn for clarity and certainty and a lot more understanding. I know a lot of people who seek certainty. They want black or white, up or down, pure or impure in all of life. Again, I understand that. There's a great comfort in clarity. Uncertain times bring anxiety, fear, vulnerability. The problem, though, is when the search for an answer comes across as "I have the answer." This leads to an attitude of fundamentalism in which you think that your approach is the only reasonable and legitimate one. The philosopher David Hartman, in his book, A Heart of Many Rooms, calls upon us to open our hearts to a multiplicity of views and truth. He explained that by making a heart of many rooms, we should strive to be a person in whom different opinions can actually reside together. By making a heart of many rooms, this is a sophisticated yet simple approach whose lessons go far beyond the study of the Constitution. In faith and politics, in our personal relationships, we have to develop the capacity to think deeply, to admit to uncertainty, to in fact live with ambiguity. It's not that we should have no opinion about things or that we should take no stand. It's that we must, as Hartman puts it, internalize two contradictory points of view and at the same time find just one way to act, always though haunted by the understanding and uncertainty that there is in fact another way to act, another way to live. Notice Hartman does say find one way to act. Appreciating the value of different opinions doesn't mean that you should be paralyzed or formulate no opinion. Rather, it means to show differing opinions your respect, as well as to show respect to your opponent, because after all, his opinion means as much to him as yours does to you. You do not have to agree with these opinions just to simply show the courtesy of respecting his right to have them. And in doing so, you treat your opponent the way you want to be treated, and in fact, you treat yourself with more respect. Making a heart with many rooms also means that you have to be willing to listen to what is being said rather than just waiting for the opportunity to rebut and speak. Someone once said, everyone simply wants to be heard. Making a heart with many rooms also means to develop your own sense of empathy towards others. While listening, try to figure out what your opponent feels or why he feels that way, and see how those circumstances may affect your own point of view. Instead of just saying, I understand, endeavor to try to really relate to what is being said. To develop in yourself a heart of many rooms means that you have to have the elasticity to entertain views, many different views, without rejecting them out of hand as illegitimate or invalid. To develop in yourself a heart of many rooms means that you can tolerate the tension that arises when you consider a perspective that clashes with your own. To develop in yourself a heart of many rooms is to reject the orthodoxy of your own view and open yourself to perhaps changing your mind and modifying your stance. A heart of many rooms is not just about being open-minded. With a heart of many rooms, you invite growth, develop compassion, and you actually open your hearts to others. A heart of many rooms lays the foundation for repairing broken relationships. It offers a real possibility of mending a fractured society. Now, when my children were young, they're 30 and 27 now, I often read the story of the Zacks to them, and I asked them what they thought the moral of that story was. And we would sit around in the evening and we talked about pride and we talked about stubbornness and how it kept the Zacks from moving forward. But they both ultimately agreed that the moral was about compromise, civility, and courtesy. The story and its moral seems simple enough, but after watching what's been going on in this country these past few years, I'm beginning to think that we need to make this required reading for everyone. Really, every college student, every graduate student, every member of Congress, our children, our clients, our CEOs, everyone. The challenges we face won't be solved overnight unless someone decides to take the first step. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. Thank you.